What's up, my people? Today we will discuss how far does Deku get into Demon Slayer. Definitely do have a bias for MHA, so I do like both series, but I like MHA better. But regardless of that, I'll try to keep this as fair as possible. Look at both sides equally, because that's what we're doing here. We're not here to talk about which one we like more. So let's go.
How far does Deku get a Demon Slayer? So we could look at this question in two ways. We could do a one-to-one comparison where we do the seasons and we basically say season 1 Deku is put in Tanjiro's shoes. So he's fighting the same exact villains, going through the same plot that Tanjiro did, but it's Deku with his feats. Or we could put Deku at full power and then put the entire verse against him at once. So we're gonna do both of those basically, and we'll start off with the one-to-one comparison. So first we have final selection arc. The biggest foe that Tanjiro faces in this arc is a big-handed demon, bunch of hands. You see it casually making big craters in the ground, but that's about it. And for speed, it's nothing too special. So we definitely have Deku here taking the win. As we see, he can literally, just a 100 smash off rip, literally pummel through the roofs of a building, all of them. So even if we give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they're faster than Deku, it doesn't make much of a difference because they're not a complete blitz factor above him. He can definitely still throw out a 100% smash before he gets tagged and take the cake. It's the same story with the following arc, but the next arc, the Suzumi Mansion arc, is where Deku definitely runs into trouble. So we have Kyogai, a former Kazuki, stated that his attack is as fast as the sound of a drum. So speed of sound, bare minimum. But we can give Deku the benefit of the doubt here because it's the sound of the attack, not his actual attack speed making that drum make the noise. Which means that Deku has a chance of attacking him before he lets off that speed of sound attack. Why is speed of sound an issue for Deku? Because in season 1 we don't have full cowling yet. All we have is Deku, his base body that he did work out for, but to get one for all in the first place, but it's still nowhere near fast enough to move at superhuman speeds. We would need full cowl for that. But all we have is an incredibly smart boy that uses this OP power in his reserve, not throughout his entire body that he can move in passively. Mentioned that Kyogai can go faster with his drums and even increase the speed of this, so that's definitely a problem. I said it's the speed of his attack that he has to hit to start going at that speed. Similar to how humans aren't speed of sound obviously, but they have guns that they can use that travel that fast. But they still have to pull the trigger in enough time before the person dodges. Deku should be able to do this because even before he unlocks the full cowling, he's able to go up head to head against Gran Torino. Although it was a sparring match, they were both holding back, of course. But Gran Torino was at least bare minimum faster than Eyesight, and he's able to predict his attacks and head them straight to right where he needs them. So I'd give this fight to Deku, again, high diff. Of course, a 100% smash is more than enough to kill Kyogai, as he doesn't show anything special that suggests otherwise. However, Deku's real problems start when Mount Nagumo arc starts, where the infamous fight of Ryu versus Tanjiro happens. We see Rory's family members, such as his father, casually creating huge craters in the ground, lifting and yeeting huge trees hundreds of feet in the air, and he's not even a Kizuki, which are stated on another level compared to all other demons below Muzan. This is stated and heavily implied throughout the series as Muzan is giving these demons his blood directly, and he's the strongest demon of them all, so obviously they would scale bare minimum above any other demon that isn't in the 12 Kazuki. Now Tanjiro believes the father to be a 12 Kazuki and even gets that wrong, but it definitely might be slow enough for Deku to tag. At most I'd say faster than Eyesight, but the father doesn't show any good speed feats in particular. So we'll give that one to Deku again, he made to high diff. But with Rui, that's when the real issue starts, because as mentioned, scales above anything Tanjiro's fought before, and is effortlessly weaving Tanjiro, who could easily react to Kyogai and his amped speed of sound attacks once he increased his tempo later in the match. So Roy also effortlessly scales above his father, who could do things far more impressive than Deku can in his quirkless human post-training form. He has a lot of lifting strength feats, but those are just typical things like tires, fridges, and etc. Nothing too impressive, and even though that doesn't, lifting strength wouldn't necessarily tie into attack potency. That's the only thing we can use, and Deku lacks in that. This means not only is Season 1 Deku too slow to actually land anything on Roy, but he would get diced up by his attacks as he can't even react to them because they're far faster than sound. Season 1 Deku has nothing to suggest he's faster than that because he doesn't have full cowl yet, and if he gets hit, he's going to get one shot. So he loses low diff, I'd say, but he definitely had a good run throughout the season. He gets up to the main fight of Season 1, the fight that everyone was hyping up. I don't think that's too bad. Now let's put Deku at his peak against all of Demon Slayer at once. Yes, you heard me, we're doing this, let's get it. So off rip, we're going to use the best feats, and we're going to start with Demon Slayer. We're going to start with the high top tiers of the verse, like Zenitsu, Doma. Zenitsu makes a huge crate in the ground, digs deep. That can get pretty high, to around 100 tons of energy, to be exact. And Doma, whose feat was weakened, so we can use that multiplier to amp him, and it was around 50 tons of energy. And that obviously scales below Muzan, as Muzan's a whole another level compared to all the other demon moons, and that's stated. In anime, we have Deku sending Chisaki in his third form, his fusion that was like the size of a building, sending him flying hundreds of feet into the air, and that was 100% Deku. But obviously, even as a whole, One for All has been growing, and that's been stated, so a 100 in the past is not even as strong as a 100 in the future. You also have Deku's feat from the movie with Bakugo of dispersing that huge cloud that even if you divide the feat into two, because it was a shared feat, it gets into the gigatons range. Then you got Deku tossing it over Shiggy in the manga, throwing hands literally thousands of feet in the air, and yet they're causing impact. Deku smashes to thousands of buildings thousands of feet away from them. And then of course, even in the manga now, his 100 is stronger. We do know some things such as Muzan being incredibly weakened by the end of the final fight, so that is a pretty good multiplier you could add for him. But even at best, it gets into the city mountain ranges of what he can destroy. And that's with Wank, of course, also considering that statement we have of the pillars burying mountains. Again, more of like a saying. You don't really see them do anything of that sort, but you can give them the benefit of the doubt, and even so, Deku would clear them in attack potency. So first category goes to Deku, on to the next. Durability, again, let's start with Demon Slayer. We don't have anything too impressive, to be honest, but what we can do is use those explosion feats that we have of Muzan surviving, barely, but surviving those explosions. And even if you do that, I mean, you got Deku doing the same thing against bigger explosions. Ignoring that, you have characters like Shigaraki from My Hero literally surviving multiple nukes, plus Star and Stripes air statue being punched at him all at the same time. And he was regenning from it, but even that didn't one-shot him in itself. So that in itself is a feat. What does that have to do with Deku? Well, that was 98% Shiggy. Even backtracking and literally going backwards to 75% Shiggy, which Deku survived hits from, that alone is a feat in itself that puts him far ahead of anyone in durability, in terms of durability, in Demon Slayer. Because seriously, no one in Demon Slayer has survived anything remotely close to that attack at all on that large scale. So another category goes to Deku. On to the next. Now, Demon Slayer has a lot of good hacks like sleep inducement, illusions, all sorts of things, manipulating elements out of thin air. Definitely a lot more than anything Deku has, but this does not help him secure a win. Why? Current Deku with Overdrive might have even broken the law of special relativity, which means he went faster than light. But even if not so, he's far too strong and fast for anyone to even get to the chance to use their hacks in the first place, and they would already have lost. A lot of people forget this when matching up against characters in general. So it's like they just assume equal stats. So I'm just going to use an extreme example, but with the same principles, so it can still apply to the situation. Let's take a character like Shigaraki from My Hero, who can decay things, and even decay things that aren't in his direct touch as his quirk awakens. And let's take the Flash. Why can't Shiggy just decay the Flash? Because he literally gets one-tapped and blitzed before he can even realize that they're in a fight. As we can see, the man is literally faster than time. Now, we know not one soul in My Hero is faster than time, but like I said, the same principles apply. They're strong enough to the point where they wouldn't be able to use their abilities. The fight ends that quickly. They just get one shot. And even with regeneration, which is in both verses, it's pretty impressive in Demon Slayer, as the demons in Demon Slayer can regenerate from any limb or any part of their torso as long as their head is not cut off. This is not a reason why Akaza would be able to outlast someone like All Might and win the fight because he keeps regenerating. No, it doesn't work that way, because All Might has displayed physical feats far above anything Akaza can handle, so he would just get one shot and then have nothing to regenerate from. So yes, while Demon Slayer does have a lot of hacks that are pretty cool, it does not help them win in this situation. But yes, hacks goes to Demon Slayer for this category. For speed, Demon Slayer has tons of great feats that are actually consistent and move along throughout the story, unlike My Hero actually, such as Tanjiro in base avoiding Hantengu's lightning casually, Zenitsu blitzing Kaigaku, who was bare minimum moving at lightning speeds, Muichiro cutting 10,000 times in a flash when all those fish were coming at him. And keep in mind, he did this against a Kizuki, and as we mentioned before, a Kyogai, who wasn't even a Kizuki at the time, had the attack speed of a sound, so we can use that to calc stack, and that feat would go crazy. But that's not it. Yoriichi, who's pretty much the Jesus of the verse, literally cutting 1,800 bits in a flash, in an explosion, from Muzan, Prime Muzan, who would be the fastest character in the verse, second to Yoriichi. This means all those speed feats we mentioned before, Prime Muzan far ahead of them. And if we calc stack that onto what Yoriichi had to cut, the feat also goes crazy and can go into sub-rel to rel to the speed of light. But calc stacking in general is sort of fallacious in a way, but I mean, it really depends honestly, but me personally, I don't use it because we could also do that with Deku, and bare minimum, he fights Shiggy in the War Art, who is 75%, who is at least equal to Anti-Symbol, who could keep up with USJ All Might, arguably his weakest form, which would bare minimum be massively hypersonic. If we even calc stack this and putting this speed onto Shiggy when Deku intercepts him and he's that far from the floor, just inches away from decaying everyone, and saves everyone by hurling them into the air, as along with himself, at probably 45%, even it being 100% would be crazy. The calc gets to massively faster than light, so I don't know. I don't think it's the best to use these, but we can use the overdrive meta, which would get Deku to light speed or beyond, and it's far more credible. Although the meta doesn't specifically tell us that it was this theory of special relativity law broken, it's the one that's most likely was, because after Deku does this, Shigaraki talks about how he was perception blitzed, and everything else leads it to being speed related, and that's the only law that could be warped speed related. Otherwise, the author adding that there would be super random and arbitrary, so we can give that to Deku, as he would definitely blitz if he is that fast. So lastly, speed goes to Deku. So in conclusion, how far does Deku get into Demon Slayer? If you do the one-to-one comparison, he makes it up to Season 1's Mount Naguma arc and loses to Roy. If you do the full power version, then he gets all the way to the final arc and he clears. Definitely a fun video to make. Let me know what y'all want me to do next. And Sir Justice, on and out.